My name is Duane Peterson, and this is Jordan Rowell. I am the cinematographer and editor of the film, and Jordan is the director, producer, and star paddler, the subject of the film. So tonight we're not going to be showing the whole film. It's about 40 minutes long, and we'll be talking about some screenings at the end where you can join us for a screening of the film. But tonight we'll just go into some details as to how and why we made the film, as well as show some excerpts from it.
So because we're talking about the Lake Champlain Basin, what this whole project is about, we just wanted to start off with a land acknowledgement, recognizing that this area that we today call the Lake Champlain Basin is the unceded territory of the Mohawk, Mohican, and Abenaki people. And we learned a lot about these cultures and about these people in this project, and always try to include the perspective in our work. The one panel on the side here, the other side of the image from the map, is me on the lake next to Odzi Hozo, which is an important part of the Abenaki origin story of Lake Champlain. It's also known as Rock Dunder, another name, the European early American settler name, which just goes to show as an example of some of the different ways people look at Lake Champlain and the different meaning that parts of the lake has to different people. And after all, the subject of our presentation tonight is our making of this film and our process and our journey through it, but it's also so much about the lake itself. And we chose to make a movie about Lake Champlain because of its beauty, as shown here, but also because of the challenges it faces.
Yeah, and so just right off the bat, I think we're going to start with a quick clip. This is actually the first 2 minutes of our film, and it'll give you a glimpse as to what some of the challenges on Lake Champlain look like.
The August average temperature in this piece of water is 5 degrees warmer than in 1970, 5 degrees Celsius. This is the oldest form of life on Earth. Cyanobacteria is everywhere in the world, but in different quantities, but under some conditions of high nutrients, with calm water, the heat, the sun, they love it.
Felt like 100 degrees out there, and you're paddling through like green and blue sludge. It's like the worst conditions of the whole trip for sure. So how did this whole idea come about? Duane and I both grew up in Vermont, just a town over from Burlington in the town of Essex. And I think we both realized that despite growing up so close to Lake Champlain, we really didn't know that much about it. And I sort of first brought the idea to Duane because of a class I was taking at UVM. Renee mentioned in her introduction that I sort of finally came back to Vermont to go back to school to pursue a degree in natural resources. And the class I took, one of the first classes I took at UVM was taught by these two gentlemen, Chris Brooks and Walt Pullman. And it was all about looking at Vermont through an environmental lens. So just learning all about the natural history of Vermont. And obviously Lake Champlain is such a big part of Vermont, not just, geographically, it takes up a lot of space on the map, but also ecologically and culturally. And so I really quickly started to learn all this stuff about the lake that I sort of wished I'd learned earlier. And I was just sort of amazed by the amount of the lake there was to learn about, how varied it was, some of the issues. And I just felt like I wanted to go beyond that experience of just learning about it in a classroom, but really just like get out from behind my desk and experience it firsthand. And so the plan was to do just that. I had experience in the past of going on long distance trips on foot. The picture on the right of the screen is a map of the Long Trail, which for those who don't know is a hiking trail that goes just under 300 miles from the southern part of Vermont to the northern part, from Massachusetts to Canada. And I did that trip on foot in 2014. It took me about 3 weeks. And so I'd always sort of wondered, not knowing much about Lake Champlain, like, would it be possible to do a trip like that, but in a boat? And so I started to devise this plan of, wouldn't it be cool to take about 2 weeks, paddle the length of the lake and camp along its shores, and yeah, just immerse myself in the lake and sort of take what I'd learned in the classroom and really start to put it together out there on the water. And so it meant that I needed to get a boat. I am not a kayaker. I was not raised to be a kayaker. My family wasn't really into paddling. And so, when I'd first tell people close to me about this, they'd be like, have you ever kayaked before? And I'm like, yeah, like here or there. And so I had to get a boat, which you see pictured here. I had to get some of the safety gear, like a pump and a paddle float, to make sure that I wasn't going to get myself into too much trouble out there. I picked up this book by Kathy Frank and Margie Holden, which is a definitive guide to paddling on Lake Champlain. They circumnavigated the whole lake over a series of a few years. And that was a huge resource for me to learn about, the logistics behind paddling, where to start, where to take out, where different campsites and food places were, as well as the Lake Champlain Paddlers Trail, which is a resource that the Lake Champlain committee maintains to show people, how they can travel along the lake in a boat and stay at different campsites and day use sites along the way. Here's me pictured camping along the shores in Split Rock State Forest on the New York side. It was important to me to try and do this as sort of pure as possible, which meant camping along its shores and not staying in hotels along the way to really get the full outdoor experience. And so I had to pack all my gear. All of it is in these dry bags on the side, and almost 2 weeks worth of gear fit into my boat. And I did have a couple of resupplies along the way. And I wanted to do it in all weather, whether it was hot or rainy. I was going to be out there because I felt like that was the way to experience the lake, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so I called upon as many experienced people as I could to take me on the lake, teach me about it. And it was, a couple of months in 2021, early summer, to really try to get some degree of experience of paddling and understanding the lake as a recreator, before I committed to such an intense journey for 2 weeks in August of 2021. And so I started the journey on Mount Mansfield, where you start any kayaking trip along the lake to Lake Champlain. Well, that's not completely true. But we start the film on top of Mount Mansfield because we're looking at where does water start its journey? If we want to learn about the lake and some of the issues it's facing, then we wanted to start at the top of the watershed. And so we started on top of Mount Mansfield with this guy, Bill McKibben, who had taken on a similar journey years before to paddle across the basin, so across Lake Champlain horizontally, and just tried to get some insight to knowledge from him to learn about the journey, but to also learn about how the issues facing Lake Champlain fit into the bigger picture of environmental challenges and climate change going on globally. And the journey continued to the actual lake itself in Whitehall, New York, which is the furthest south point on Lake Champlain, and where I was joined by a group of family and friends to see me off on the journey. The lake at this most southern point is very narrow. If you've never been down to the southern part of the lake, this is the Narrows of Dresden. It's crazy. You feel like you could throw a rock from one side to the other, which those of us, whether we're in Middlebury or in Burlington or St. Albans, the lake is so much more vast and big where we are. And we it's almost hard to imagine that it can be this narrow, almost like a river. But of course, as you get up to Crown Point, New York, which took me about a week to get to, well, a little bit less, maybe 5 days to get to, the lake starts to open up and you really get that experience of being on a big, big body of water. And so the next clip that we have for you is taken from this point on the lake and sort of shows that experience of coming out from this really narrow part of Lake Champlain and opening up into the much larger main body of the lake.
The Crown Point Bridge is like this gateway into the main part of the lake. Because as soon as you cross underneath that bridge, like, the lake changes character and you're in it now. We got a little bit of chop this morning. Just the littlest bit, which is new. The lake is starting to pick up some length at this point, so any wind coming from the south now has 30 miles or so to build up and be a little bit more noticeable. I'm making my first decent-sized crossing of the lake. It's beautiful out here. Definitely the biggest expanse of water I found myself in on this trip. The water's almost 300 feet deep below me. So, hope I don't drop it. I was really excited to go to Split Rock. The cliffs there are 200 feet high above the water. And the lake plunges 400 feet deep right below them. I was tracing my journey on the map, and it was kind of cool to look back on it and say that, yeah, I've done this part already. I've come this far. 1/3 down, 2/3 to go.
Right, so that's just another clip. That was one of the most striking points on the whole lake for us. Those were the cliffs at Split Rock on the New York side. Really dramatic landscape that I personally didn't even know existed before making this film. So I'll go into a little bit of detail as to what it took to make this film. After all, this was not just a long paddling trip. We were also making a film about it, which added its own layer of challenges and opportunities. So when Jordan first approached me with this film, his idea was that we would canoe the lake together, and do it together, a joint effort, and that I would film our journey. And I thought about that. I thought it sounded like a lot of fun, but I pretty quickly realized that I would probably just be filming the back of Jordan's head for most of it, and that might not make for the best film. And so we decided that we would get a boat, a follow boat. This is the boat that we ended up getting. We didn't have a lot of money for this film. We did raise some money, and we'll talk about some of the funders of this project, but we did have to, cut some corners to be able to make this work. And unfortunately for me, this was the boat that I ended up in. It actually ended up working great, despite what you see here. We got a great deal on it, if you can believe it. But here I am on the right, filming with Jordan and our good friend Ryan operating the boat here. It was really important to us to have the camera like on the water, not just be filming from the shores or from the GoPro or from the drone, which we did all of those things, but also having the camera on the water, really getting the kind of the lake perspective as Jordan did this journey. And along the way, we interviewed about a dozen people, and here are some images of them. It's really important to us to I think get perspectives from a wide variety of people throughout this basin. We kind of realized early on that there's a tremendous wealth of knowledge shared in this basin, and so to really tap into that, Jordan really reached out to as many people as we could to organize interviews along the way, which was its own kind of logistical challenge. But so these are a handful of the people that we talked to along the way. Let's see. And yeah, so, we conducted interviews along the shore as we went. Here we are with Chief Don Stevens of the Nulhegan Abenaki band. This is at Shelburne Museum, right on the shores of Lake Champlain. And so a lot of different people, a lot of different places along the lake, and kind of together paint a picture, create a portrait of this place through the stories and the perspectives of the people that call it home. And some of those interviews were even done on the water. We actually happened to run into a Vermont Youth Conservation Corps crew who was removing invasive species, water chestnuts, in the southern part of the lake. So this was a totally happenstance interview, one that we hadn't planned for, but we ended up joining them to pull water chestnuts and talk about the importance of removing invasive species. And I think the next clip that we have shows a little bit about, gives you an example of what an interview on the water looked like.
I'm Andrew Romano. I am a student at the University of Vermont studying Parks, Recreation, and Tourism. Grateful to be here, to be the spokesperson of one of my clubs, People of Color Outdoors, also known as POCO, which is a social justice outing club for BIPOC individuals on campus. And I'm just super stoked that we have the opportunity to talk to Jordan on his fantastic adventure here on Champlain.
Tell me again what POCO is and then why it has to exist.
We mostly seek to break down the barriers for access to the outdoors for underrepresented groups. What we want POCO to do is to really instill a sense of personal identity and personal inclusion inside that greater community. One of my close friends, he's black, and I took him skiing while we were on the chairlift, and he was like, "I'm doing white people things." And to me, I've never thought about that. It's just skiing is another sport that you could be outside, but to some, it's like a racial barrier to be if you're doing outdoor things, you're white, and people might not want to lose that sense of identity. When youth aren't exposed to the outdoors, they can't foster that appreciation for the outdoors. And then when they come here, they're like, "Oh, mountains, so what? Champlain, so what?" And then they also don't understand that taking care of them is quite the important thing to do.
So I think that clip just gives you an idea of how important this little 12-foot inflatable dinghy was. That would not have been possible to shoot without it. It was a great kind of tool to use. It was small enough to be able to maneuver easily. We could pull it out on the shores easily when we stopped, and the 4 horsepower motor was just enough to keep up with Jordan in his ocean kayak.
For anyone who's been to that site that last interview was taken up in the Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge, you might know how shallow it is up there. And, you know, a little behind the scenes thing here is when we were filming that, it was a challenge because the motor, you know, a boat motor can't really be in shallow water. And so Andrew and I kept having to sort of rearrange ourselves, and Duane would have to rearrange himself so that he could get the angle right, but the motor wasn't digging into the sand. But it was kind of windy that day, or you would just float, and so Duane kept kind of like floating into the reeds, and so we'd have to kind of like, you know, pull him out and then rearrange ourselves. It's a great idea on paper, doing an interview on the water with 2 kayaks, but you quickly learn sort of the real physical logistical challenge of doing that. And we made it work, and I think we got some of the coolest interview shots of Duane, you know, with the camera floating by us, which really, really worked out and sort of established, like, made you feel maybe like you were in that place.
And I think it's worth noting that I also did not grow up on the water. Like Jordan, I had a relationship with Lake Champlain where it was maybe something nice to look at the Burlington waterfront, but really hadn't spent too much time in boats or anything like that. So I had to get a boating license to be able to operate this dinghy. So, you know, it was a learning experience around the board in a lot of ways.
And I think this picture too also just demonstrates, I don't know, it just triggers a memory from me of like, we really spent that whole summer of 2021, you know, the trip was 2 weeks. But we spent that whole summer collecting footage and meeting people around the entire basin. And like, this is what my truck looked like for a couple of months, with kayaks shoved in the back and towing this boat trailer. And Duane was driving this rig up and down to collect interviews, and then go back home and dump his memory cards, and then come back out to meet me at camp one night. And, you know, it's just like, you know, the adventure on the water was obviously was fun and fulfilling, but that whole summer of just exploring the whole basin was really quite an experience I like to look back on.
So here's just another behind the scenes photo. Again, like I said earlier, we really tried to pull out all the stops, try to use every tool in our toolkit to see this lake. I think I think that this film is in many ways about a lot of different perspectives, different human perspectives, how different people from different communities, whether they're, you know, academics or, you know, indigenous leaders or farmers or students, you know, how they see this lake and interact with it. All these different, you know, human perspectives, but also different visual perspectives, different camera perspectives. So here I am with a GoPro on a painter's pole, trying to get a unique angle. I'm not sure this one made the cut, but it does kind of give you an idea of how we were really experimenting on the water too, trying to tell the story in the most dynamic way possible. So again, here's our boat, and the drone. Our good friend Ryan Malley did all the drone operating, which we're very grateful for. I think those are some of the most striking images of the whole film. Gives you an idea of, you know, where we were pulling out to do some of this shooting. This is at again at Split Rock. This is where we were flying the drone for some of that footage that you saw of the big cliffs earlier. And okay, here I am with Ryan, who helped as a second shooter as well. I think this is at the trailhead Mount Mansfield back in the early part of the summer of 2021.
This was our first shoot for the film. I guess it was like right at the end of mud season when hiking trails opened back up again. So around Memorial Day, we had our hike scheduled with Bill McKibben to hike up to the top of Mount Mansfield. And we didn't really know what to expect. And Duane and I had actually gone to Mount Mansfield like the week earlier to you know, hike the mountain and sort of figure out where we were going to shoot the interview, and sort of like where good spots would be to get footage of us hiking up. Because we knew that, you know, once Bill was there, we're going to try to keep the experience to be like authentic and not burden him or I in that moment with like feeling like we were filming, but let us just have a conversation naturally and enjoy the walk. And the reality of that means that the burden falls on these two filmers, Duane and Ryan, who would run up and down the trail during that hike in order to get those shots of us walking past the camera, which I think was quite the start to this whole project.
That was that was one of the most physically arduous shoots I've ever been on. I don't know if anybody's spent much time with Bill McKibben, but he's extremely athletic, and like, hikes very fast generally. But we were trying to leapfrog him, basically running up Mount Mansfield with cameras in tow. So great start to the production, but definitely challenging. Yeah. Another example of the different tools that we're using to film. So this is a GoPro with a big acrylic dome on the front to get this kind of view where you see underwater and above water at once. Kind of a unique angle that you can't get without that specific piece of equipment. Here's another view. This is here's another GoPro on a pole mounted at the back of Jordan's kayak. I guess we're just showing this all just to give the impression that, like, this was not just a kayaking trip, but it was also a film production, which added a whole nother layer of complexity of things to think through and think about.
Yeah, and I think as we flip through the next couple of pictures, this project, like from the beginning, is kind of ambitious in the way of, like, we really wanted to capture like a little bit of everything, which is one way to tell a story. Another way to tell a story is to really, like, focus in on one area or one person or one, corner, one, perspective. But we wanted to show how varied it was, the variety, and sort of show the contrast, show the similarities, show what people had in common, show how the lake was different from one end to the other. And I'm realizing now, I think that really required us to have all these different tools, different ways of putting the camera, driving around from one end to the other, talking to a bunch of different people, just like cast this wide net to tell the whole story of the lake and not just one piece of it, which of course is always going to be a little bit impossible because you can't talk to everyone. I'm sure a lot of you out there tonight have something to say about Lake Champlain that we haven't heard yet, and maybe we'll get to hear it in the Q&A after. But that was at least a goal, to get as much as possible, and so we had a lot of footage and a lot of exploring.
Here I am just pumping water out of this boat, which was kind of constantly taking on water. We had a big waterproof case for the camera, so it wasn't too much of an issue, but it was a constant battle to keep that boat dry. And again, here we are at the top of Split Rock Mountain on the New York side. That's like Ferrisburg on the other side, I think. The mouth of the Little Otter Creek, is that right?
Yeah, Lewis Creek, where they come together. Yeah.
Right. In Jordan, or no, that's film subject's dog. So that gives you an idea of the production, what the trip entailed, what the filming entailed. And all the while we have these goals. We have a few goals with this project, and so I think we'll just go into some of those. Why we did this.
Undoubtedly, part of this project was to have an experience that both Duane and I wanted to have. As Renee mentioned in the beginning, we've been working on creative works together for a while. But it had been since high school, really, since we had teamed up to work on a project. And during the time apart, I had gotten really into the outdoors. Duane had really become a professional filmmaker and dove into that world. And so this was an opportunity for us to do something together. And it was also a chance for us to portray a place, shed light on an issue, in a new way. There's conversations about Lake Champlain happening a lot. There's a lot of different content out there about the lake, but we felt like this was an opportunity to introduce this story by combining an adventure with the challenges facing the lake, with these different perspectives, in a way that would be engaging for young people and old all around the basin. And so we sort of wrap the purpose of the film, the goals, into these three different directions. The first one is on the surface level. We want people to watch the film and be inspired to go spend time on the lake themselves. Be inspired to take out that dusty kayak in the backyard and go out into Mallet's Bay for an afternoon, or go to a beach they've never been before, or take the ferry over to New York and just really get out there in the place, because the world is a big place. There's a lot of things to see, but we really wanted people to be inspired to learn more about their home, because we had found that we were glad we spent the time to do that.
And I think it's, equally important to get to know your home in order to feel a personal connection to it and feel personal responsibility over protecting it. And so, I think some of the people that we interviewed talked about this is you can't begin to conserve a place until you really know it and really appreciate it. And so I think getting out there, getting on the water, inspiring, especially young people, to build a connection with this place is, one of our first goals. So that's the pane on the left. In the middle here, we hope that the film encourages people to listen to their neighbors, listen to the people who share this basin, and listen to these other perspectives, listen to what other people might have to say, even if it's from a point of view that you may not agree with or not have experience, talking to a person with that experience themselves. I think listening to other people is of utmost importance if we're going to address some of the problems with this lake. I mean, nobody can do this alone. We are going to have to come together. So just listening and connecting with our neighbors, I think is, we're hoping to inspire that as well.
And then lastly, our third goal was to really get people to act in some way, to take part in stewardship efforts happening in the basin around them in whatever way made sense to them, whatever way was meaningful to them. There's a lot of different ways to get involved, but we did want people to say, hey, I live here. The future of the lake relies somewhat on what I give to it, whether that's, going out and pulling invasive species, taking something out of the lake, or going out and planting trees, and creating a healthier ecology on the side of the lake, and giving back to the basin. And so a part of the film that is towards the end that we didn't show a clip from tonight is when we participate in a couple of those ways to get involved and be stewards of this basin.
And of course, we, to accomplish these goals, we have hopes to get our film seen. So we premiered this film in April of 2022. Was it that recently? Okay, yes, it was just less than a year ago.
2022.
Yes, in April at Main Street Landing here in Burlington. A sold out crowd, about 260 people came out to see the film, and we did a panel afterwards, had a whole lobby of people with tables, showing people how they could get involved. It was a wonderful evening, and I was blown away by the response and by the attendance, honestly. So, getting people to our premiere was maybe goal number one, but we also wanted to get this film into additional audiences. So here's a picture. Yeah.
So at the premiere, we also tried to really build community around the film, and not just, you can't go online right now and find the film yet. We'll tell you more about that at the end. But we really wanted to encourage people to come together to learn about the lake together and to celebrate the lake together. And so the premiere was this awesome opportunity where people were starting to get excited again about getting together in person. And so we had a bunch of tables and people come out, and it was really a great way to kick off the tour of our film.
And a tour it has been. We have made this film available to organizations, nonprofits, and schools who want to put on screenings for their members. So here we are in St. Albans. What's this? This is a very cool historic building.
Yeah, the stone house.
The stone house right on St. Albans Bay. So this is 100 feet from the lake. Watching it, I think this is in August of last year. And so we've put on, I don't know, maybe 15 of these screenings or so.
Yeah, we've shown it 15 probably of these public screenings, maybe a little over 20 of showings in general.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a shot from St. Albans venue. You can see how close we are to the lake. This is me presenting the film to AmeriCorps Vermont members as sort of the culmination of their service. AmeriCorps members from all over the state, which was a super cool opportunity to tie this into their work. And, you know, we also, from the beginning, really focused on education, you know, educational settings, classrooms, for an opportunity to show this film. And this screening in particular was really special because I got to kind of take the film full circle and bring it back to UVM, to the classroom that I was originally inspired with the idea in the first place, and get to show it to students there. And that was super fulfilling.
This is one of our more, that was a more recent screening at Hula in Burlington. Here we are showing it to students of the Burlington High School, the Burlington City and Lake semester. So it's a special semester-long program where they learn a lot about the lake itself. This was one of the instances where we actually brought it into the classroom. We put together a whole classroom discussion guide so that educators can pair our film with different lessons and vocabulary terms and different, questions, ways of thinking with the film. And this was particularly fulfilling to be able to work with these high schoolers to go through some of those exercises. And we also have been submitting it to film festivals. So as of today, we've been selected for 3 film festivals. The Middlebury New Filmmakers Festival we were in just this past season, as well as the Fresh Coast Film Festival. And Jordan and I will be traveling to Nevada City, California in February to screen it at the Wild and Scenic Film Festival, which is one of the biggest environmental film festivals in the US. And that one has a touring component, so the film may travel beyond, to screenings throughout the country, which is very exciting. So that's just a bit about the impact that the film has made and what we're hoping to do with it. And we have these wonderful sponsors who helped make this film possible from the very beginning. If you want to say anything more about them, but
yeah, I mean, Duane and I are always super lucky to be the ones that get to talk about this project to you all and share it. But there are so many people that helped make this happen, from the people we interviewed, from people who helped us with equipment, to people who helped with who helped us during fundraising. And so, like Duane said, this was a film on a budget. In a lot of ways, it was a passion project. But we did get some support, and we're so happy that this was able to happen.
And with that, we invite you to join us at one of these upcoming screenings. Here are the dates. We have more information about each of these on our website, lakechamplainfilm.com. We'll be posting about them on Instagram at Lake Champlain Film. These are the ones that we have lined up in the future. But again, if you or anybody that you know might be interested in hosting one, we're happy to provide the film, our educational guide. We'll even show up to your screenings and do a Q&A if you like. So we're really trying to get this film out there and seen throughout the basin. That's really our focus now, is gathering people together in groups like this, for instance, to kind of build community and be together around this film. And then it will be online streaming in May 4th, I think. It will be on Vermont Public. So it'll be streaming on Vermont PBS on their platform and on YouTube. So you'll have that to look forward to as well if you can't make it to one of these screenings. And I think that might be it. Is that our presentation? Yeah, that's what we got for tonight. So great. Let's see if there are any questions then.
Thanks, guys. That was really interesting. We do have a few questions. I encourage any of you, as you're processing what you've just learned, to add some more questions to the chat. The first one is interesting. It's a thought I had. What did you learn from Bill McKibben?
Yeah, great question.
Bill had some great wisdom about thinking about the history and the present and the future, and the experiences, the perspectives that people have as being reflections kind of the past and of the present, but also their imaginations of being, a reflection of what the future might become. That was particularly moving to me, but also just thinking of this place as a basin, as a whole, rather than just what you can see at one time. What else?
Yeah, I think another thing I learned, which is like a totally different direction to take away from the conversation with him, was because Bill is such like a global thinker about environmental issues these days, he almost looked at Lake Champlain as in a completely positive light, right? In a way of like, look at how wonderful it is that we have all this fresh water, because so much of the world doesn't. And like, look at Lake Champlain and the basin around it and the people who live around it as like an example of a sustainable way of human life on this planet, which is always good to keep in mind of like how that basins like this don't exist all over the place. Like we really do have something special in terms of this freshwater resource. And so like getting that idea from him and like how it fits into the picture and how lucky we are what we do have. There are still problems that need addressing, but what we have is so precious and worth taking care of.
That's great. Sounds just like him, actually. Next question is, did you stop at ECHO, the Science Museum in Burlington, for any information? They study the lake daily.
Good question. We did not film at ECHO. I don't know, what was our...
Yeah, so one of the, since this is a making of presentation, we were hoping to do an interview outside of ECHO on the UVM research vessel and take a ride with the captain of that boat and go out on the lake and film. There was a variety of logistical issues that prevented that from happening. There were some interviews that we hoped to get, and even some we did get that don't make it in the film, just how things worked out. But ECHO is like holds a soft spot in my heart, because that was some of the place that I really, first heard about or spent time around Lake Champlain as a kid, because my grandmother would take us there, and then we'd go get French fries at the Splash next door. So
Nice. Karen Jackson says it's a fantastic presentation and film, and she's going to pass the word along to others. How do we access the 112 virtual showing?
So I think those details will all be on our website at lakechamplainfilm.com, and there's
Okay,
so things that should all be should be hyperlinked to where you can register for those.
Berta, there are links in the chat to their website, so you can check that out. Berta thinks that maybe the Green Mountain Club here, the local Green Mountain Club, would be interested in showing it. Here's another one about ECHO. Have you done anything with them? And I think right now we're all caught up with questions. So
I do see one, maybe not a question, but bet our local Green Mountain Club members would appreciate seeing this. We did do a presentation last year for the Green Mountain Club, and we are doing another one for the members of the Burlington section of the Green Mountain Club. So if you're a member of the Burlington section, the Green Mountain Club, you might just have a chance to watch the film with them.
And if you belong to a different chapter, reach out to us and we'd be happy to work with you to put on another one.
Oh, that's great. We'll have you show it right here at Ilsley Public Library.
That could be great, yeah.
And here we got some more questions. Let me scroll down. Talking about the Bennington Club. Oh, yes. So they're talking about not here in Bennington. Did you just say you did Bennington?
No, so we'll be screening the film at the annual meeting of the Burlington Green Mountain Club. That's, I think, later this month. That's a private screening for their members only, so it's not open to the public. So that one's not on our list of upcoming screenings, but we'd be happy to put on a screening for the members of the Bennington Green Mountain Club as well.
So Berta, check out their website and get in touch. Heidi says, terrific project and wonderfully fulfilled. Do you have any more projects on the horizon?
For now, it's really just getting this one out there. We're working, we both work full-time jobs, but in our spare time that had been going to this project, we're really using on time, presentations like this, but also just trying to put on more screenings and really get this film seen. So before I move on anyway, I'm really trying to put as much energy into this as possible.
Have you done any screenings outside of the state? I'm wondering if people outside of Vermont, how they are responding to it, if it's different from the local feel you get around here.
Well, that's a great, Great question. I had just been thinking of this. Actually, it'd be cool to show a map of some of the locations of screenings, because we've really gone all over. The film has been up in Canada, and over in New York, at Paul Smith's college last summer. And there's talk of us going back to the New York side again. So hoping to have that happen sometime this winter or spring. And yeah, I mean, the feedback has been wonderful, and the experiences have all been, different things always pop up depending upon which community we show the film to. And so that's been the coolest thing, is just to get to connect to different communities around the basin.
So far, our screenings have been with people who know the lake or live, within close proximity to it. So I'm excited to bring it to California in February and see how that audience kind of receives it and what their impression is.
That's great. I'm curious about the conversation you had with the Abenaki folks, and did you gain any insights? I mean, they're just so connected to nature in general. I'm just curious if talking to them added anything to the film or changed anything how you approached something.
For sure. That was one of the most revelatory interviews I think that we did, or profound in a lot of ways. I don't know, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, getting the, an indigenous, and I say an indigenous perspective of the Lake Champlain Basin was always extremely important to us. It kind of felt like the project couldn't go forward unless we include that, because the perspective hasn't always been listened to. And I think we're starting to experience a shift in hopefully paying more attention to that experience and that perspective, uplifting that, and trying to do better by those communities moving forward, because there's a lot of harm that's happened in Indigenous communities in the past, and there is a lot to learn, and a lot of a future of Indigenous knowledge in the Lake Champlain Basin. And so talking with Chief Don Stevens of the Nulhegan Band of the Coosac Abenaki Nation was like a pretty profound experience. He himself, personally is really genuine, really gregarious, like loves to share stories and, what he knows about the lake. And he actually came out to our premiere and joined us on a panel. So those who know Don Stevens know that he sort of gives and gives and gives to the Abenaki community in Vermont, but also to the outside community to learn more about the Indigenous perspective and Abenaki ways of knowing the basin.
That's great. That's great. Heidi Willis also says places like Basin Harbor and Ferrisburg might be interested. And Alan Coulter says, any thoughts about the pollution of the lake?
For sure. I mean, well, that was kind of the impetus or the motivation behind this, is that, yes, we wanted to have this great adventure and make this film and hopefully inspire people, but we did this because there are problems, because the lake does have issues, and pollution being one of them, especially phosphorus pollution. Phosphorus runoff from a variety of sources is mainly to blame for the cyanobacteria blooms that we see. And so that was kind of the starting point, is like, this lake is in trouble. It's a beautiful lake, and we want to explore it and get to know it, but also, get to know its challenges, get to know its potential and its challenges. And so, I think the pollution, if this lake wasn't polluted, I'm not sure we would have made this film.
That's great. In the film, the clip you showed where you were paddling through all of the horrible sludge, I might have missed it in the clip. Where on the lake was that?
So I don't know if it was clear in the clip. That's just the very first 2 minutes of the film. We kind of start with this cold open where you're just thrown into kind of the worst of the problem, and then it actually is also kind of the ending of the film. So later on, it becomes clear that's Missisquoi Bay, one of the areas most affected by cyanobacteria.
I see.
Yep, towards the northern.
Sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's sad that, when we took on this project and talked to even just our friends about the lake, we learned that, close friends of ours were like, oh, I don't go swimming in the lake. The beaches get closed in Burlington, half a dozen to a dozen times every summer, and folks just leave with a sour taste in their mouth. And so that was part of the thing that we wanted to explore, is like how that affects people's attitude towards the place. And we sort of learned that learned a lot about cyanobacteria, like how localized it is. So even though, one day a beach in Burlington is closed, that doesn't mean that the water isn't swimmable and safe in another part of the lake. But we also realized that so profoundly impacts how people look to the future of the lake, whether they just throw their hands up and say, oh, it's a goner, it's polluted, nothing we can do, let's move on and go somewhere cleaner. That's sort of the title of the film, is that we hope that's not what happens, because in a way there is no other lake. If we pollute this one and move to another lake, that what's to say the same thing's not going to happen. And so we should stick to this lake, recognize that this is our local body of water, and we have a duty to treat it as good as we can, and reverse the situation so we can have clean, healthy water.
Well, that's great. And there's still a couple minutes left. If anybody has a last minute question they want to throw up. In the meantime, I'm curious, why is the lake so shallow way up north? Do you guys know why that is? I rented a cabin on the lake a couple years back, and I mean, I was so far out in the middle on my raft that I couldn't even see my house. And when I got off the raft, the water was only waist deep.
Yeah.
So what is that about?
Yeah, we heard from a local there that if you were to take a paper map of Missisquoi Bay, that the water would be and did it proportionally to the bay, that the water, the piece of paper would be thicker than the water is deep. It's so shallow, so flat and so shallow there. And I'm not a geologist, so I don't know specifically, but there is the Missisquoi Bay, which brings a lot of sediment in from the whole Missisquoi watershed into that basin, and it's geographically kind of closed off from the rest of the lake. There's a relatively small opening that connects it to the rest of the lake. So I think sediment has just built up over years and years in that area.
Oh, that's too bad. All right. Well, it has been a pleasure listening and learning from you this evening. I really appreciate you coming out or tuning in to talk to us all this evening. And I hope everybody who's tuned in has enjoyed the program.
Thanks, Vermont.
Thank
Humanity.
you.
Thanks, everybody.